I'm Stu McLaren, and this is the What the Speak podcast.
What the Speak, episode 43. Come on, son.
Do you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch? If not, these expert discussions and insider tips can help you right now, today. Welcome to the What the Speak podcast. I'm your host, Brian Kelly.
If you don't speak with passion and clarity while inspiring confidence, I'll walk you through an approach I've used to generate over 7 figures in revenue and quadruple my income. Join me live on March 20th for the Presentation Profit Formula, a free training I've created to help increase your income, authority, and influence through better communication. Here's what you'll learn in this action-packed training. First, I'll talk about my 5 P's of a perfect presentation that converts your audience into sales. Next, we'll uncover simple techniques to boost confidence and reduce filler words like and ah. Lastly, we'll look at how to create a sexy presentation that builds instant credibility and positions you as the authority in your field. This stuff is so good, I should probably charge a few $100s for it, but since you're a subscriber, I want to hook you up. If you're finally ready to realize your full potential and become a better communicator, go to whatthespeak.com/formula. Make sure to sign up, and I'll see you there. Stu McLaren, are you ready to answer the question, what the speak?
I was born already and ready to answer the question.
You were born and ready.
Born and ready.
That is awesome. Well, Stu, I'm so glad to have you on the show. I know that you're the co-founder of a popular WordPress plugin called Wishlist Member, plus the customer-friendly help desk software, Rhino Support. You've started an inspirational charity called World Teacher Aid, and you've also managed to acquire, is it 80-plus t-shirts from Threadless?
Yeah. I'm embarrassed to give the number, but we're definitely approaching 100.
That's awesome. Well, I've got about 20 of them, so that's nice. A decent collection. But, well, cool, Stu. So I would love to hear it directly from you, though. Can you give us a quick rundown of who you are and exactly what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I was a guy that went to college for business, but felt like I was a square peg in a round hole. I just didn't feel comfortable wearing a suit and tie. And although that's what they were training us to do, was to go into corporate Canada, it just wasn't the right fit for me. So I was looking for alternatives. And long story short, that's what actually got me started speaking, because in college, I failed out of my first year. I didn't fail, but you had to maintain a certain grade point average with this particular program. And I didn't get it because I was playing soccer full time for my university. And that was my primary focus. School was, unfortunately, it took the back burner. So I didn't get the grades, but I talked my way back in. Second year was, not much different. I barely got through. Third year, though, everything changed for me because of a course, and particularly a video that we watched in that course on a gentleman by the name of Doug Hall. And now he spoke on the topic of creativity, and I just immersed myself in that and started applying it to my schoolwork. And it took me from failing out of my first year to graduating top of my class. And so I was passionate about that subject matter. So although I signed on the dotted line to go into the corporate world, I actually resigned from that position before I started and started pursuing a speaking career to teach other students how to use their creative abilities to design the life that they want. And so that's kind of what started it for me. And then I started to learn about how to really leverage what it is that I was teaching students to reach more people. That led me to a lot of learning about how to market and package myself on the internet. And then I started doing a lot of consulting because other business owners were wanting to learn how to do the same thing. And then that led me to realizing that consulting, although it was very lucrative for me, it restricted my time, meaning I was still trading time for dollars. And so again, I was looking for more ways to leverage the same information I was teaching business owners. And that's what led me to wanting to create a membership site. And there was no solution that was easy. So long story short, I partnered with 2 great friends of mine, and we ended up creating the solution Wishlist Member. And that was over 5 years. That was in 2008. Yeah. And the rest, they say, is history.
Awesome. Well, let's some of those things that you shared, I want to dive into. But first, I would love to just get a quick high-level take on when you're out there speaking in front of audiences, what are typically the topics that you're delivering? What's the message that you're sharing?
So I get asked a lot to speak on the subject of membership sites and certainly packaging and selling content online. And so that's certainly a niche presentation that I deliver. And then more and more, I've also been asked to speak on the message of more money, more impact. And this is something that I'm really passionate about because, as you mentioned at the top of the call, my wife and I have a charity where we build schools in Kenya. And I'm really passionate about the subject of entrepreneurs maximizing their ability to be able to make money and therefore make a difference in the world. And so that's what that presentation is about. More money, more impact.
Well, I want to hit the pause button really quick because I want to share a quick little story with the audience. A couple months back, I was actually at an event that Stu was speaking at. And what happened was, essentially, in a nutshell, Stu was able to raise over $80,000 for his charity, which was completely amazing. One of the most fantastic things I've been able to participate in and experience. And the power of that was something that I've gone and told that story to multiple entrepreneurs that I'm friends with. And is something that I think gets a lot of people who are very much entrepreneurially minded very excited to be able to make an impact and difference in the world like you guys have.
Well, I appreciate that, man. It was an incredible experience for me too, and the credit goes to everybody in the audience because they and you were the ones that helped make it happen. And the great news is, here's how that has translated. The school has almost been built, if you can believe it. Wow. We just got word this morning that the government has hired the teachers for that school. So, in the next couple of months, that school is going to be up and running, educating hundreds and hundreds of kids that otherwise would never have had that opportunity. And that all came as a result of that conference. Yeah,
well, it's cool. We'll definitely have a link to your charity in the show notes for this so people can check that out. But it's just something I wanted to mention that came up during the course of our conversation here today.
Cool.
So, Stu, let's dig into your origin story as a speaker. Now, you gave us a little bit of insight into kind of how things came about over the last decade or so of your life. But let's talk specifically about that first moment that you kind of got bit by the speaking bug, or the moment in time that you realized, wow, this is something that I can do to share my message, to share my passion. When did that all begin for you?
It definitely began when I was at college or university because, we did a lot of presenting in front of our class. And it was just one of the things that I just looked forward to. Once I kind of tapped into the creative side of my brain, I then began looking forward to presentations to find new and creative ways to shock and awe the audience and kind of mix it up a little bit, make it a little more fun and entertaining, because business presentations are just so dang boring that I was really excited about doing that. So that's when I kind of got the urge. Then when I left, when I graduated university and I started speaking as a career, that was definitely a rude awakening because, when I began, I didn't realize that there was a whole business around it. That was, the first thing. I was learning the business of it. But presenting was a whole nother kettle of fish because when you're presenting to bigger high school audiences and college audiences, their attention spans are so small. Yeah. So you have to work doubly hard to keep their attention. Every 5-10 minutes, you have to do something that's going to pull them back in so you don't lose them. Because if you lose them, they're gone and the message is gone. And therefore, the audience doesn't get the value from your presentation. So I learned a lot in those years when I was speaking to colleges and high schools. And it was great training ground for all of the presenting that I've done ever since.
Yeah, talking to an audience like that is really tough. In fact, I recently had Josh Shipp, who's one of the top teen speakers out there right now.
He's a great speaker.
Yeah, he's amazing. But it's just like, for most of us, getting up in front of an audience of teens or kids is kind of frightening because it's like, how do I keep their attention? So definitely a good training
keeping their attention, and they don't care they have what's the word I'm looking for? They have no worries about showing you that they're bored, and that they don't care about your message. Like it's written all over them. At least when you're presenting to like an adult audience, they'll, pretend that they're into you, but not with those guys, not with the kids.
I love it. Well, cool. So Stu, what's something that, either you've struggled with through the years as you've become better and better at speaking, or maybe it's something that you're struggling with even now today that you want to improve. Is there anything that you can share with us?
I think early on, one of the things that I definitely struggled with, and I still do to some degree now, is just getting comfortable in my own skin and with my own message. Early on, I used to love watching other great speakers, especially old school speakers like Charlie Tremendous Jones. Like I used to love watching that guy speak. And there were so many great speakers that I started taking little bits of each of them and trying to combine them to formulate my own style. And what I've learned over the years is that, yes, although you can learn so much from other speakers, you really have to just speak on your own and get lots of experience so that you begin to get more and more comfortable with who you are, not only internally, but who you are on stage. And, early on, definitely that was a huge struggle for me, was just getting comfortable with that. And then even more so now, I'm still just kind of really zoning in on that voice and learning how to project that voice and learning how to communicate clearly in my own skin.
Yeah, Stu, I've seen you speak live, obviously, and one of the things that I love is that, you do try to do something that's going to wake the audience up, get them engaged right from the onset, and doing it in a way that's unique to your personality and something that's not necessarily forced or contrived, but something that really fits who you are and the type of character that you are. So that's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, like one of the things that really was a vulnerable moment for me was, the very first time that I ever told a story about what happened to me at my wedding when my brother-in-law revealed the truth about the very first sale that I made online. And I remember, it's a powerful story in so many respects. And the very first time that I ever told that, I all of a sudden was just filled with emotion, and like tears just started streaming down my face. And afterwards, I thought to myself, man, I was really upset with myself that I got so emotional on stage. And one of my good friends and mentors pulled me aside and they said, don't ever lose that. If you ever lose touch with that moment, that's when you really start to lose touch with a whole bunch of things. And so ever since, I've just been comfortable telling that story and really going back to that moment. And I think as speakers, we've got to be vulnerable on stage because that's what people connect with, just like what you were talking about. And that, I'm a goofy kind of guy, and being comfortable, bringing that out up on stage, despite no matter what audience I'm presenting in. So those are the kinds of things that I'm dealing with now, is just, getting comfortable with those vulnerabilities and certainly, that goofy side of me as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing that is a recurring theme with so many of my guests, is really tying your presentation into who you are as an individual, and being able to tell stories and share moments from your life that connect with the audience. And Stu, you've got some great stories. The one that you mentioned about your brother at your wedding, and then also your daughter, some of the stories that you share there, these are all things that are deeply rooted in your personal history, but connect and resonate with the audience. And it's kind of like that common ground for all of us to be able to realize like who you are, where you're coming from, and then be inspired by the information that you're sharing.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. And I would love to explore some things specific to your unique perspective and kind of your expertise.
Okay.
So one of the things is, as being somebody who's organized, I think it's like 25 plus seminars and conferences, I believe is what I heard, was you've got some unique insights into speaking, and would love to see, is there anything that you could share with the audience from those experiences of putting on these conferences and working with a lot of different speakers? One lesson, one key thing that you would share.
There's a couple for sure. The top one that comes to mind, being both on stage and behind the scenes running events, the speakers who have the most impact on the audience are the ones who actually take the time to get to know the audience. Recently I saw a presentation by the gentleman by the name of somebody, his name is Joey Coleman. And Joey absolutely blew the audience away, because what he did was, prior to his presentation, he did a ton of research. And I talked to him afterwards. He said it accumulated to about 6 hours of research. And the research was on the people who were in the audience. He was learning, he was on their Facebook profiles. He was learning about who they are, their careers, what are their frustrations, what are their challenges, what are their things that light them up. And he was making all these connections between people in the audience. And so if somebody was a past lawyer and he found, a group of people that were 3 or 4 people in the audience that were all lawyers, and then he had pictures of them. And it was just a masterful way of really diving deep into who the audience is. And inevitably what happened, being in the audience myself, when he showed my picture coming up and my name, and he told a little bit about like who I was, I immediately just was connected with him. Oh. And of course, Joey was not the headliner of the event by any means. But what was interesting was Joey, by far, head and shoulders, won the best speaker of that event out of 15. And this wasn't the first time that he's won that award. This was I think the 3rd or 4th event in a row where he had won that award. Now, I share that with you because most speakers, they come in, they do their thing, and they're gone. And there's a time and a place for that. But I think moving forward, if you really want to have impact, if you really want to stand out with the audience, then take the time to get to know them. Either do your research like Joey did, or in many cases, what I've seen is speakers who come to the event before their presentation and get to know the people who they're going to be speaking to, mingling with them, networking with them, just learning bits about them, and then weaving that into the presentation. And when you do that, my goodness, does it ever have a huge impact on the people who are in the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that. I'm somebody that goes to a lot of conferences every year. And on a handful of occasions, I've seen that where even the keynote speaker, who might be, the closing keynote individual, they're there from that first day if it's a 2 or 3 day conference. And just, you see them, you know who they are because obviously they're the keynote speaker, but they're just mingling with people, they're having meals with people and drinks and just kind of sharing that camaraderie at the conference to learn about who they are, and then to see them get up on stage on that last day of the conference to do the closing keynote and relay some of the stories and conversations and experiences that they've had and met with people there at the conference and weave that into their presentation is pretty powerful.
Yeah, totally. And, there's a lot of elitism, I would say, in the speaking industry where, speakers hold themselves on this pedestal. And I think if you can get down off that pedestal, and mingle, connect with the people before you present, their hearts and their minds are going to be way more open to the message that you have to share. And of which, if they're open to it, they're going to get way more value from it. And if they get more value from it, you're going to be one of the highest rated speakers wherever you present. So it really pays its dividends, not only for them, but for the event organizer and for you as a speaker. Perfect.
Okay, so the other thing I was curious about was to get your opinion on, regardless of whether somebody's just starting or whether they're, a pro right now, how can they best leverage these speaking opportunities to grow their business?
One of the things that an early mentor told me is that it's easier to find a new audience than it is to create a new presentation. Now, I always struggled with this because I always had the impression that if I deliver a presentation in front of one audience, I could never deliver the same presentation again in front of another audience. And when he shared that lesson with me, it really opened my eyes to the importance of mastering a couple key presentations. And one of the things that I learned was he taught me how to create presentations in chunks. So these are like stories or lessons or chunks that you nail, meaning you've got those practice, you've got those rehearsed, and you can insert them in any presentation that you're designing. So when you're designing a presentation, you basically have your main chunks, and then you're sprinkling specifics for that particular audience around that. What that does is it alleviates a huge amount of pressure from you as the presenter to come up with new content and new material. But the other thing it does is it allows you to practice and master those chunks. And when you do, it takes it away from knowing the content and it gets more into the performance elements of presenting that material. And when you can get into the performance elements, that's when you can really have a profound impact on the people in the audience, because your timing is going to be impeccable. You'll know exactly when people are going to laugh and when to pause. You'll know exactly the facial expressions that you need to emphasize the points that you want to emphasize. And it takes it from being a good presentation to a masterful presentation. And if you look at some of the best speakers in the world, they have all of those elements absolutely nailed down. The timing, the inflections, the facial expressions, all of those. They know exactly when the audience is going to laugh. They know when they're going to be sad, when the emotions are going to be tugging. And those are the most important things if you really want to have an impactful presentation.
That's so good, because I know we've often talked about on the show with other guests the idea of having different themes that you can pull from, and really this notion of like a repertoire of things that you can pull from. But I like this particular example that you shared where it's almost like you've got building blocks or chunks of these stories and elements of your content that you can kind of pick and pull from depending on the situation or the audience, and build together something that's unique, but you still have various aspects of it completely nailed down. And then it's just a rearrangement essentially of those stories or those examples or whatever.
Because, I mean, totally. Because think about it, like, let's say that you're learning a new skill and you only try it one time. You're never going to be as good as you can absolutely be if you're only doing it one time. Yeah. But let's say you do it one time every single day. I mean, it's not going to take long before you have that thing nailed down. And that's what the same principles apply to when you're presenting. If you're presenting the same content over and over and over again, you're going to get those stories nailed down, and you're just going to get better and better and better. And every audience that you present that in front of, it's going to have more and more impact. The problem as speakers is that we have the fear of, well, if somebody's already heard that story, then they're just going to shut off and they're going to get bored.
Yeah.
No, my friends. If it's a good story, man, people will want to hear that over and over and over again. The great Les Brown, I've heard him tell the same stories years and years. But man, I just get right into it every time I hear him tell it. Brendan Bouchard, who's a great speaker, I've heard him tell the same stories over and over again. Michelle Cachette, who we saw at the event, she's a wonderful storyteller, and she has the same stories, and those are her chunks, and she tweaks them and modifies them depending on the audience. That's when you really get to mastering the art of speaking in front of an audience.
Absolutely. Well, cool, Stu. Let's wrap up our discussion with our rapid fire Q&A. So we're going to do about a half dozen questions really quick. First thing that comes to your mind. And the first one we'll start off with is, are you a slide or no slide kind of guy?
I'm a slide guy. So I like using funny visuals to, startle the audience, wake them up, that kind of thing. So I'm definitely a slide guy.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different thoughts on that, and sometimes people are like, well, it depends on the situation, but I'm one of those. I love slides.
Yeah, as long as you're not using them as a crutch and you're not reading off of the slide, then I'm a definite slide guy. I don't agree with slides, where they're up and you're just basically reading. But for sure, using the right visuals can have a profound impact on the audience.
Absolutely. So who's one speaker that's out there right now that inspires you the most, and why?
Well, he's not out there anymore, but certainly I mentioned him, Charlie Tremendous Jones. I love that guy, man. He was just, I remember meeting him a couple times, and he was like a grandfather, that just had great stories, and I loved the way he presented. It made me laugh. So he's definitely an old school guy that I absolutely love. Right now, let me think. I definitely, like I said, Brendan Bouchard, I love watching him. He comes with so much energy, and he's a great storyteller, and he's somebody who really has spent the time to master the craft of presenting. And I would say the same with Tony Robbins. Like a lot of people have different opinions on Tony, but I love Tony. I mean, he's another guy that just comes with, he's full out. He's a great storyteller. He's got great content, presents it well. So those are a few for sure that capture me.
Very cool. So Stu, what's the craziest, funniest, silliest, most bizarre thing that's ever happened to you while on stage?
Well, let's see here. I've had a fire alarm go off right in the middle of my presentation, so that was kind of awkward because you obviously everybody's got to get out. So that was kind of awkward. And then trying to pick up after, the fire alarm, we all go outside and then we come back in, and then trying to like pick up the momentum again. Yeah, that was a little bit difficult. So that was probably the craziest thing.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, these things happen, right? Everybody's got a story.
Totally.
Okay, so what's the impact, or rather, how big of an impact has speaking had on your career and your business?
Early on, it was my business. When I was speaking to high school and college students, that's how I was earning income. Now, it has very little impact. I do it more now for the ability to connect with customers and potential customers. And probably right now, I'm definitely focused on spreading the message of more money, more impact. So it's less about it benefiting my business and more about having the opportunity to spread that message. My business is driven online. So, 99.9% of all revenue that we generate is generated online. So it's not speaking in front of an audience per se that's driving the revenue, but definitely it helps to connect with customers and, open some potential customers' eyes. But I don't do it often enough now for it to have a significant impact on revenue. It's more about sharing a message and getting that out to people.
Got it. So when you first got started with speaking, what's one piece of advice that you wish you had back then that you now know?
That your time is valuable. So in the beginning, man, I was just desperate. I was like doing anything to get in front of an audience. And I didn't realize at the time, my first paid speaking engagement was $100. And I was like over the moon. I'm like, holy cow, I can't believe somebody is paying me $100 to stand up here and share a message that I would share with anybody. Yep. But the reality is, as speakers, we got to really value our time because we only have so much of it. And so we get, requests to speak for free. We get requests for interviews. We get requests for one-on-one stuff. And you've really got to understand the value of your calendar and the importance of blocking and setting time aside for opportunities like that, but also being very mindful of how much your time is worth. Because if you don't, you're going to undercharge, and then it's going to make it very difficult for you to have the time to master your craft. Yeah. If you're not making enough income and this is your full-time gig, then you've got to somehow come up with that money elsewhere. And that's going to take your time, your energy, and your efforts away from mastering the one thing that you want to become good at, which is speaking. And so you've got to be able to value your time so that you have enough revenue coming in to be able to dedicate your time to mastering that craft. And if you don't, those two things are always going to be in conflict, and you're always going to be, pulling one from the other.
Yeah, such great advice and a good place for us to end on. So, Stu, I want to let everybody know we're going to have links to your website, the resources that you mentioned, your social media profiles over at whatthespeak.com in the show notes for this episode. And I really want to thank you for your time, your effort here, sharing some great insights and your personal story. You truly are somebody who kicks ass when you speak, present, or pitch.
Perfect. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you. Take care.
You bet. Are you working out right now or listening to this episode while driving? If so, I know you're not able to leave a rating and review in iTunes at the moment. However, next time you're in front of your computer or smartphone, could you be sure to do so? Just go to whatthespeak.com/audio, or whatthespeak.com/video. Thanks so much for your support.
All right, here we go with the outro.
Thanks so much for joining us today on What the Speak. Be sure to visit whatthespeak.com for show notes on every episode and to sign up for our email list to stay updated on resources that'll help you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch.